محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Inshallah, I want to start by asking you all a question. Because the society we live in today, we like to idolize fame and success. So I wanted to ask you all, what are the characteristics of somebody that make them successful today? If I was to ask you that, what would you tell me? You would tell me somebody's rich, or they're famous, or they're well-liked, or they wear the nicest clothes, they always smell the nicest, they always have the most flashiest things, right? That's what you would describe to me. And believe it or not, those are some characteristics that actually the Sahaba themselves had. You're describing to me right now of one Sahaba in particular that I want to talk about today. His name is Mus'ab ibn Umair. And today is a day where I'm going to talk about a lot of things, right? But I'm choosing to talk about the Sahaba Mus'ab ibn Umair because I feel like his life cannot be more relevant to us today and the lessons we can take from it. So who was Mus'ab ibn Umair? He was a young Sahaba. He was a youth, one of the shining youth of the Quraysh. And he had it all. He had a mother that loved him, who raised him, who spoiled him, right? He had all the money you could ever want. He was rich, like very rich. Like he always wore the nicest clothes, right? The most exotic colors. He wore the most exotic perfumes. He was known for always smelling the best, right? He had a nickname within the people of Mecca. The people of Mecca gave him, right? The nickname was the flower of Mecca. People called him that. He didn't go around telling people to call him this. They called him the flower of Mecca. It wasn't feminine at all that your name meant flower, right? The flower of Mecca. And he just had his shoes. You know what he stepped on the ground with, right? His shoes were imported from Yemen. And this was before airplanes, right? People had to caravan walk through the desert for days, maybe weeks, to give this kid shoes, right? He had everything that you could have ever wanted, right? But that wasn't enough for him. It just wasn't enough. Despite all of that, all the wealth, all the fame, everything that he had, he knew something was missing. Because he was smart, he was intelligent, right? And he recognized that the society around him had problems and something had to change. And he had initiative, right? And this is one thing that I want you all to remember from this talk. Mus'ab had initiative. What do I mean by that? That he knew that there was something wrong with the society he lived in. He knew that there were problems around there. And instead of talking about them, he went and did something. That's what initiative is. He realized that there was a group of people in that society who also recognized the same thing, who were calling people to end racism, who were calling people, can everyone still hear me? Okay. Who were calling people to pray to the one and only God, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who were calling people to feed the needy, to give charity, to be kind to your neighbor, to treat other people the way you want to be treated in that society. And he recognized that that was the right thing. And on his own, remember he had initiative. He didn't go and text some of his rich friends, hey, do you want to go check out that talk? He went and did it. He went and joined that circle. He found Prophet ﷺ on his own, and he took shahada from the Prophet ﷺ himself. Right? And he started attending those talks. And he slowly but surely became a very learned person in Islam. And in fact, he was known to be amongst the Sahaba one of the most beautiful reciters of the Quran. He became one of the most beautiful reciters of the Quran. His voice captivated people, right? He was using the skills Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him for his deen. But it wasn't before long that his family soon found out about his conversion to Islam. And after the events in San Bernardino and things like that, a lot of Muslims were scared about being discriminated against. You know what Mus'ab's family did to him? Anyone want to take a guess? His own mother, who raised him from birth, imprisoned him in his own house. He was arrested in his own home. And he stayed like that for days. And she even appointed guards to watch over him. She was a wealthy woman, right? She appointed guards to watch over her own son. And this was a time in which the majority of many of the Muslims, right, were being persecuted. They were being humiliated, ridiculed. They were being tortured and tormented physically and mentally, right? And it was at this point that the Prophet ﷺ was given permission by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow people to migrate to Abyssinia. He was allowing people to leave because the conditions were getting so hard. So Mus'ab recognized this as his only chance. And Mus'ab escaped his imprisonment and he joined the people going to Abyssinia, but not before giving up everything. He was going to a foreign land, right? He wasn't famous in Abyssinia. Mus'ab ibn Umair was such a popular youth amongst the Quraysh, right? He was so good looking, he had everything, he had riches and everything. The women of Mecca used to line up to watch him walk by. Do you think anyone was going to do that when he went to Abyssinia? Do you think anyone was going to call him the flower of Habasha? He left behind all the clothes he had, all the perfumes he was famous for wearing for, all the wealth, everything he left behind. Why? Because now he found something that was really fulfilling. Because only with the remembrance of Allah do the hearts find tranquility. See, Mus'ab was still rich, but he was rich in a way that we couldn't understand. Later in Medina, there was a halaqah of the Prophet ﷺ, and Mus'ab walked in, and he sat down in the halaqah. And when the Sahaba looked around, and they looked and they saw Mus'ab, right? Their faces and their hearts just sank. And some of them even began to cry because of the state that Mus'ab was now in. Remember, he was someone who had everything. He had everything. And when he walked into that talk, he walked in with every piece of property he had. And that was a single blanket. That's all he had to his name in Medina, a single blanket. And just that image in the Sahaba's minds, that he used to be the shining example of youth of the Quraysh, that extravagance. And now all he had was a single blanket. So Mus'ab, for making the sacrifice, he was honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It wasn't a sacrifice that was in vain, he was honored, right? See, Mus'ab wasn't someone who he wasn't some standard that was too far out of reach for us. We like to think, I'm sure we might be thinking, there's no way, I'm not calling you all to give up everything you own, right? That's not my point of saying this. My point is that Mus'ab recognized and realized something that I hope that we realize, that this life isn't important. Mus'ab knew the secret, he knew the truth, right? He knew what was important in life, and that it wasn't life itself, it was the next life. He understood that what was important in life wasn't life itself, it was pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and earning that spot in the next life. And for this sacrifice, he was honored. During that period of Mecca, things were getting so difficult that the Prophet needed, or he realized that the Muslims had to leave. In order for Islam to grow, they had to go somewhere, right? So he sent Mus'ab. Another title we can call Mus'ab is ambassador, right? He sent Mus'ab to a city named Yathrib, which would later become the city of the Prophet Medina. Mus'ab ibn Umar was the first ambassador to Medina. Before it was the home base of the Muslims, Mus'ab was sent there. And by his hand, and why was Mus'ab sent? He was young, he was charismatic, and he had a captivating voice, remember, right? And people from different tribes, one by one, would come to him and take their shahada from Mus'ab, before the Prophet ﷺ was even there. And he opened the doors for the people in Mecca to escape that persecution and find a new home in Medina, right? So many people owe their peace and tranquility, owe their foundations, owe their founding of Islam to Mus'ab, right? He was rich in ways we can't understand. If you want to hear the story of someone who's rich in good deeds, you can study the story of Mus'ab ibn Umar. Might not have been rich in this world anymore, right? But he was farming good deeds, right? People after people were learning the truth of this religion from Mus'ab. And during times of ease, it was the same as during times of hardship. During the Battle of Badr, what was the Battle of Badr? That was the highest point of the Muslims at that point, right? It was when they were at their best. They had just defeated the Quraysh that had pushed them out of their own homes, right? And at the aftermath of this battle, the brother of Mus'ab ibn Umar was captured. He was a POW, prisoner of war. And the Muslims, they treated the POWs very well, right? They were eating the same food as the people that had put them in that position, right? The same people that imprisoned them ate the same thing they gave to the prisoners. They treated them very well. But still, imagine you're Mus'ab's brother. You're tied up, you're in the enemy's home base, you might be worried, you might be scared, you don't know what they're going to do to you. But then you see your brother, right? Mus'ab, and he's free, he's walking around, right? And I can imagine like they're making eye contact, right? And then Mus'ab walks over. And what does Mus'ab say? To the prison guards, tie him up tight, because his mother is a wealthy woman, and she will pay a high ransom for his escape. You see, Mus'ab recognized something, and he understood something that Nuh alayhi salam understood. That everyone who's not on this boat, everyone that's not in this ship, is not my family. But even deeper than that every one of us is in the same boat. All of us in this ship, every one of us, each and every one of us, are a brother and a sister stronger than blood. And if we understood that, if we acted upon those same morals that Mus'ab ibn Umar had, the world would be at our feet. We would rule this world. But instead, we cheat each other, we backbite each other, we discriminate against each other. In my community, nothing's going to happen until we start changing that. In times of hardship and in times of ease, Mus'ab was at his peak, right? During the Battle of Uhud, right? And this is almost like the opposite of what happened at Badr. During the Battle of Uhud, right? When the Muslims were distraught, when there was chaos, when there was rumors spreading that the Prophet ﷺ might have been killed, right? What did many of the Sahaba do? Some of them ran away. Some of them gave up. They just dropped in their spot. What was the point of fighting if the Prophet ﷺ was killed? But what did Mus'ab do? He literally made himself a target. He was the carrier of the flag, right? And what is the flag bearer? He's a target, right? Because if the enemy wants to demoralize you, who are they going to take out? The person carrying your flag. And he literally made himself a target, probably saving so many other lives in doing so, right? And he took the flag in one hand and a weapon in the other hand to defend himself. And he charged, right? And he started repeating, Muhammad ﷺ is nothing but a messenger, and messengers have passed away before him. Muhammad is nothing but a messenger, and messengers have passed away before him. And that sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's actually an ayah of the Quran. But at the time Mus'ab said it, people didn't know it to be the words of Allah yet. Before people learned them as the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Mus'ab said them. It wasn't an ayah at the time. It was revealed after the Battle of Uhud. And so he repeated this, and he went forward, and he was giving everything he had for this deen, right? Until his arm was cut. And what did he do? Did he drop the flag? No, he dropped his weapon. And he picked up the flag in his other arm. And he continued. And he repeated, Muhammad is nothing but a messenger, and messengers have passed away before him. Until his other arm was cut. And then what did he do? He picked up the flag with what remained of his arms, clenching them against his chest, right, with stubs. And he repeated, Muhammad is nothing but a messenger, and messengers have passed away before him. Until he had nothing left to give for this deen, and when he had no energy left, he fell to the ground. And subhanAllah, when the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were burying Mus'ab, just to see the state he was in, right? Remember, all he had left to his name was that blanket. Allahu A'lam if it was the exact same blanket, but they tried to cover his body. And you can imagine it's probably dirty, torn, maybe blood-soaked. And when they covered his face, his feet were exposed. And when they tried to cover his feet, his face was exposed. He didn't have enough left to cover his own body in death. And that was Mus'ab ibn Umair, the shining youth of the Quraysh, who had everything. Anything you could ever want, he had it. But he gave it all up. Because he realized that the goal in life wasn't life. It was the next life. And the point of the story, the point that I want you to take away, is that Mus'ab had anything he could ever ask for, but he was missing something. He went from one of the richest people in his society to one of the poorest. But that's because he was missing something, right? He truly didn't start living until he gave everything up. And again, I'm not saying that we should start giving everything we own. What I'm trying to say is this, that it is very difficult for somebody who sleeps too much, eats too much, enjoys this life too much, to suddenly wake up one day and realize that there's a problem. And Mus'ab ibn Umair recognized that. And he knew that maybe it wasn't until he started giving things away that he could truly start living. And subhanAllah, it's not until we start to realize this, right? Until we start to say no to ourselves and no to our own desires and yes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we might never change. Our individual situations might never change, and our situations as a community might never change. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah A'raf, Surah number 7, verse number 172. He mentions a conversation that we all once had. We all once had. And that's a conversation in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks the entirety of mankind, all of the sons and daughters of Adam. He asks us, am I not your Lord? And what do we all respond? Yes, we bear witness. It is something that every single one of us have done that we have forgotten about. That we've forgotten. And this conversation is the covenant that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is our promise to Him that He is our Lord, that our lives are from Him, our lives are by Him, and our lives are for Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we forget this. And Mus'ab ibn Umair stayed true to his covenant. You know, when the Muslims were surveying the battlefield of Uhud, right, it was a very difficult scene. Very difficult, because there was many Muslims that were mutilated by the Quraysh afterwards, right? In very disgusting ways. The own beloved uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, Hamza, right, was mutilated, and it was a very graphic thing to describe. So I'm not going to describe it, but it was extremely difficult for those Muslims to see that. But when they got to Mus'ab ibn Umair, right, and remember the state he's in, the Sahaba started crying, right? They cried. Why? Because he had everything, right? Everything you could want. You want a loving family? He had it. You want money? He had it. You want nice clothes? You want nice things? You want youth? You want good looks? Mus'ab had everything, right? And he gave all of that up for this deen. That and his right and left hand. Everything. And the Prophet ﷺ, you know, he gave the Muslims glad tidings that he was amongst the shuhada, right? But I want you to ask yourselves, why were they still crying?
Sorry, Nobby.
Then the Prophet ﷺ, as they were going to bury him, he recited an ayah from Surah Al-Ahzab, verse number 23. And it translates, from amongst the believers are real men who have already confirmed the covenant made with them. From among them are those who have given their due already and those who are waiting to. And they will not replace this want with anything else. Mus'ab was a shuhada, right? He was a witness. And he was true to his covenant. But the ayah says there was people that have already confirmed that covenant and there are people still waiting to. And they haven't changed in their determination the least bit. What are we determined to do? You know, are we going to uphold this covenant the same way Mus'ab did? Mus'ab was in that same gathering as us. When we said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He asked us, am I not your Lord? And we said, yes, we bear witness. We all testified that with our tongues. Mus'ab testified that with his hands, right? When we've all heard that hadith, and when the Prophet ﷺ said, if there's some problem in your society, if there's something wrong, try to change it with your hands. And if you can't, try to change it or speak out against it with your tongue. And if you can't do that, then hate it within your heart. Mus'ab ibn Umair gave his own hands for this deen, right? He was a person of action. He was a person of initiative. You know, the one thing I wanted you guys to take away from this was that Mus'ab had initiative, right? He was someone who went and did things, right? He wasn't someone that sat around and talked about it. You know, if there was one thing that put him on this journey, that life story that I just gave, right? That amazing journey to where he ended up, if there was one thing, it was his initiative. Why? Because before he joined that circle, before he went and found it, he was just a regular person who was living the life of the Quraysh. He had everything. But he recognized that the society around him had problems, that there was things that needed to be changed. And there was a group of people that were changing them, and those were the Muslims. And he didn't have to text his friends, do you want to go check out that talk? He went and did it. He went in and he acted upon it. He held that covenant with his actions, not just his words. And my community, we can look around right now and we can see problems. There's so many things wrong in this world, but we talk about them too much and we don't do anything about it. Today's Christmas. I didn't talk about that, right? We're a few weeks after like the incidents in Paris and San Bernardino. I didn't talk about those. There was developments in those situations, right? I didn't talk about that. We're a few days after like the Republican debate, and so many people are now using the name of Islam to incite fear in people, and there's so much discrimination. I didn't talk about any of those things. Why? I talked about the life of someone who lived over 1,400 years ago. Because when I stand up here, I want to make sure I talk about a problem that I see that's wrong with the community. And the problem I see is that we talk too much and we don't do enough. We're not acting. We're not changing things. Things are staying the same. And until we work upon ourselves, nothing's going to change. I was invited to give a talk here to the Masjid School youth a few weeks ago, right? And the Masjid is rebuilding, and alhamdulillah, we're making some very good progress. But if you look at the state of the Masjid School, they don't have classrooms. They use this space. They use the tents outside. You know, the weather has been crazy, right? May Allah bless them. I was invited to give a talk, and we were installing that pipe right outside. So there was no space for the youth to be. We went to Lamira Park. It was a damp day. I remember there being mud on my shoes. And I was sitting there with the youth. Some of them were on one bench. Some of them were on the other. They weren't even sitting together. Some of them were sitting on the floor. And I gave them a little talk, and I didn't realize till after that there was profanity written on the tree right behind me. That's a problem. Why don't we change that? Why aren't we doing something about it? You know, when we started building this masjid, our goal was June of 2015. And when that didn't happen, we very quietly changed the 5 to a 6. I really hope we build this masjid by Ramadan this year. May Allah make that a reality. But the one thing that I want us to take away is that we're talking a lot, but we have to do things, right? We have to change things. And I'll leave you all with this, and I hope this is the thing you take away, that it is nearly impossible for somebody who sleeps too much, eats too much, enjoys this life too much, to suddenly wake up one day and realize that there's a problem. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in our affairs. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this masjid, bless the youth of this masjid, the children of this masjid, the elders of this masjid, the sick and the deceased. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to build our masjid before Ramadan of this year. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have to firm our hearts firm upon this deen, to change our hearts firm upon this deen. Ya Allah, we believe in you. So have mercy on us and forgive us, because you are the best of those who show mercy and the best of those who forgive. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنه وفي الاخره حسنه وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا انفسنا وان لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم امنا فاغفر لنا وارحمنا وانت خير الراحمين. يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. يا عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون وأقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Please ensure that your lines are straight. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. وقل ربي أعوذ وأعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي أن يحضرون حتى إذا جاء أحدهم الموت قال رب ارجعون لعلي أعمل صالحا فيما تركت كلا إنها كلمة هو قائلها ومن ورائهم برزخ إلى يوم يبعثون فإذا نفخ في الصور فلا أنساب بينهم يومئذ ولا يتساءلون فمن ثقلت موازينه فأولئك هم المفلحون ومن خفت موازينه فأولئك الذين خسروا أنفسهم في جهنم خالدون. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. فمن ثقلت موازينه فأولئك هم المفلحون ومن خفت موازينه فأولئك الذين خسروا أنفسهم في جهنم خالدون تلفح وجوههم النار وهم فيها كالحون ألم تكن آياتي تتلى عليكم فكنتم بها تكذبون قالوا ربنا غلبت علينا شقوتنا وكنا قوما ضالين ربنا أخرجنا منها فإن عدنا فإنا ظالمون قال اخسئوا فيها ولا تكلمون إنه كان فريق من عبادي يقولون ربنا آمنا فاغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks Rehan for such an inspiring khutbah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq, ability, inshallah, to become active and stay away from things we shouldn't be doing. We are too busy gossiping, backbiting, bickering about things which are either irrelevant or are a result of jahiliyyah. Many of things people object to, they are jahil. They have not studied Islam correctly. So, inshallah, we will adhere to the advice of Sheikh Rehan Khan, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Next week's Khatib will be our own brother Omar Hussain. If you recall, 2-3 years ago, he spent the entire Ramadan with us, and he's in Texas. He's coming back to visit us, inshallah. Tonight will be a family night. Brother Muhammad Atiyah will be conducting the family night. He will be discussing life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the month of Rabiul Awwal, so inshallah we'll be talking about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is an open house. Our dynamics, our environment, our mentality, our thinking has to overhaul completely. We haven't got a chance at all until and unless we learn how to communicate, how to talk, like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. We have to communicate with the society. So inshallah, there are flyers available to that effect. Open house January 2nd, 11 o'clock. Dr. Yahya Abdul Rahman, Dr. Aslam Abdullah, and few other scholars will join us. Invite all the non-Muslims, all your neighbors, your friends, your co-workers to come. And question answer session will be Jesus in Islam. And also, inshallah, all the modern day dilemmas that we are facing, and there are a lot of questions that people have. Inshallah, those questions will be answered by experts. Safety-wise, for safety for all of us, mashallah, lot of extra cameras in your new building under construction, and in this building has been installed. Motion sensor lights are there. Night security guard is here on foot. He's patrolling all night. Increased police patrol has happened. Suspicious activity, we see any, inform the management or leave a message on the main number. Parking, when you park the car, park orderly, stay away from the fire lanes or the walk space for the people. Church parking is available, utilize the church parking. I'm here to inform you that last Sunday, we distributed about 30 baskets of fruits to the neighbors. Guess what? All these people for years who lined up in the city hall to reject our construction, they started showing up to your masjid. One of them was so impressed, your neighbor, he came here and brought a card to hug all of us, and his family writes down, Islamic Center, thank you for the fruit basket. You passed my test. And of course, he said Merry Christmas and Happy New Year 2016. Your neighbor, Gonzalez and Jean.
Takbir.
So we got to do more of these type things, and come and join us on the 2nd to talk to all these people. Donate generously for the general funds. Security guard increase and the cameras increase and so on and so forth. It costs money. New building, El Nino is coming. Help build. I want you to know, as a founder of this center, I'm here to tell you, this center was founded to be moderate, not too much to the right, not too much to the left, in the middle. And alhamdulillah, takbir. That's the way we have maintained it. That's the way my beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. When he invited the Farsi and Yemeni and Rumi, everybody sit together who became the Sahaba. That's what this center is all about. So, you should donate to build such a center where we can bring all the people who are suspicious of us into this facility and introduce them to the correct way of practicing Islam, inshallah. Before the end of December, pay the donations to the masjid and declare them to the Uncle Sam, to the tax policemen, so that you can get the deductions to that effect. There's a lunch outside, live cooking is going on, mashallah, and then the family food is there also. I've asked Rehan to say the dua for security, please. Say the he wants to pass the buck to me.
We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our sick and our diseased, to bring them back to their full health, to make them stronger than they were before. We ask that when we pass away and then he passes away, we pass away without a single sin. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله.